out your notebook. There's more.
If you are a consumer of independent news, then the first place you should be going to is Consortium News, and please do try to support them when you can. It doesn't have its articles behind a paywall. It's free for everyone. It's one of the best news sites out there, and it's been in the business of independent journalism and adversarial independent journalism for over 2 decades. I hope that with the public's continuing support of Consortium News, it will continue for a very long time to come. Thank you so much.
Get out your notebook. There's more.
Welcome to CN Live, Season 2, Episode 18, The Truth is a Joke. Comedians look at the U.S. election. I'm Joe Lauria, Editor-in-Chief of Consortium News.
And I'm Elizabeth Voss.
In American political discourse, the truth often has to be a joke because you have to tell one usually to get at it. Comedians are allowed greater leeway to explore uncomfortable truths than news reporters are, it seems. After all, it's only a joke, right? Gregor Benton, in a 1988 essay called The Origins of the Political Joke, wrote, "Political jokes are the citizens' response to the state's efforts to standardize their thinking and to frighten them into withholding criticism and dissent. Freud said jokes are especially suited for ridiculing people in high places who we would otherwise fear to attack because of inner or outer inhibitions. The political joke perfectly illustrates this point. The politically powerless use it as a tribunal to which to pass judgments on society, where other ways of doing so are closed to them." On the show today are 3 of America's finest political comedians. Randy Credico is an American perennial political candidate, at least that's what the Wikipedia bio says. He's a comedian, of course, a radio host, an activist, and the former director of the William Moses Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice. He's appeared on numerous TV shows before CN Live, including The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He also worked Vegas, but all of those venues have been demolished. Randy's activism got the Rockefeller drug laws repealed in New York.
Lee Camp is the host of the hit comedy news show Redacted Tonight. His new book, Bullet Points and Punchlines, is available at leecampbook.com, and his stand-up comedy special can be streamed for free at leecampamerican.com.
And Lee's also a columnist with Consortium News. Ron Placone is a comedian who can be seen regularly on The Jimmy Dore Show and previously with the Young Turks. Is that correct, Ron?
That's correct.
He hosts the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show, Get Your News On with Ron. He's been on Sirius XM and seen on TMZ, RT, and Free Speech TV. Welcome, Randy, Lee, and Ron to CN Live.
Thank you. Great to be here today.
It really is to have a collection of you together to talk about this election. We really seem to be living in a time when the state is trying to standardize our thinking and frighten us into withholding criticism and dissent. Before we get into the election, which is only 11 days from now, I'd like to ask each of you about the role of comedy in politics, how each of you came to combine the two. Randy, it seems that you started from the documentary I saw about you doing non-political comedy and then moved in to mixing politics and comedy. Maybe Lee and Ron, tell us a little bit about the combination of the two and what it means.
You talking to me first? Well,
I am.
All right. So for me, I try to make this short. Look, I'm older than these two guys, and these guys are great political satirists. Thank God we have guys like Lee and Ron on the horizon. I'm like a generation not above them, but at least before them. And I started out doing political humor. I was an anti-war activist because I was around, my first vote was for George McGovern. All right. So you know where I was politically back then. I worked Vegas. I did impressions. I was inspired by David Fry. And then Mort Saul got me to say, get out of the impressions and start doing political humor. And I mixed the two. And in 1980, I moved to New York City. And in 84, 85, I met William Kunstler, who had a huge influence on my life. and he was the greatest civil rights attorney, but he used his role as an attorney in these great trials for political purposes, to push a political cause. And so that's what he impressed upon me. And I went to Nicaragua about that time. For the next 5 years, I took comedians there. And I used to do my act in front of the U.S. Embassy in Managua against the war in Nicaragua, the counterinsurgency in Guatemala and in El Salvador. So that was it. At that point, because of Kunstler, I totally changed my life. And I knew that this was a role as a political satirist, not just to use the stage and get laughs, but I had to use it as an activist. And so, I went on the Tonight Show in 1984, 85, and I attacked U.S. policy in Nicaragua and Central America. But that was it, man. I don't have any regrets about that. That's the role. I was also influenced by Juvenal, the Roman satirist, and by my favorite satirist of all time, of course, who was Diogenes, who I've dressed up as a million times. And you just go through this life. You use your, it's great to get laughs. It's great to get applause, but it's even better to try to affect some change. And that's what I use the political satire. That was what I was using it for, was to try to, in whatever small fucking way I could, because obviously it didn't work. The things are as bad now as it was when I started. So you try to do your best, and maybe you'll leave an influence, on the next generation or not. But that's what it's all about, man. It was,
about the Rockefeller laws repealed.
The Rockefeller laws was good. We got some changes there. Because of Kunstler, I was running the Kunstler Fund. I was running the Kunstler Fund at the time. I had worked on Richard Belzer's HBO show in 1997. And we spent like 6 months on the worst fucking show ever written. And I was part of the writing team. And the worst show ever performed, and the worst show ever edited, because we were both fucking whacked out on cocaine the whole time. And when it was over, I said, I got to dry out. And I went down to Florida. I spent a month in a $20 a night motel room. I saw some C-SPAN show with Jeff Sessions and a fellow who did 20 years under the Rockefeller drug laws, who got out on clemency by the name of Tony Papa. And I said, fuck. That guy did 20 years for what I just did with Belzer in the last 2 months. And then I started organizing families of prisoners, influenced by the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo in Argentina. And for the next 7 fucking years, I was on the sidewalk, obsessed with this movement, because there were so many women, guys who were paralyzed from the neck down, like Terrence Stevens, with muscular dystrophy, who were doing life sentences for minor drug offenses. And we stayed on it for the next 7 fucking years, man. And there were changes, not enough. I wouldn't even show up on the day of the signing because it wasn't enough, man. It was kind of a surrender. And I can blame Cuomo and Sharpton. I can blame all these others that parachuted into the movement that fucked it up. So at any rate, that was it. We did that. We did Tuya, Texas, which is a great achievement in the Kunstler Fund. That's the thing, man. People say you did a Tonight Show. I said, fuck the Tonight Show. I got an award from the Texas Ace. What do you call it? The NAACP for my work in Tuya. So that's what's important. Not that the award's important. Just that kind of work was important to me. And and I see. Look, I've done this for fucking ever. I saw Lee Camp at the. Way back in 2011, I first met him. He was out there protesting at the Occupy Wall Street. I said, this is a great sign to see a guy out there who's doing activist work, not just doing comedy, but participating in the activism. This is exactly what I want to see. And Lee kind of embodies what we need in this at this stage in our lives. And so I'm kind of rambling on, but it's good to see that. And I know Ron has been out there doing great work, and so that kind of I'm heartened by the fact that I'm on with these two guys and the kind of work that they're doing to improve and using their talent for not just for themselves, but for the betterment of humanity.
Well, that's a good segue into Lee. Tell us, Lee, how you first combine politics and comedy. And do you find it's easier to tell the truth telling a joke than if you were a straight newsman?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Randy, for those kind words. And Randy was also an inspiration to me once I discovered him along my comedy journey. But similar to Randy, and I think to most good comedians that end up doing politics in comedy, I started not very political. I was just focused on becoming a comedian. I wanted to do stand-up, moved to New York to do stand-up. And then I became increasingly political. I think the Iraq War, technically the second Iraq War, hardened me and made me realize how much bullshit we were being fed. And I kind of couldn't believe it. And so I slowly merged the two worlds of my activism on one side and my comedy on the other. And it's been a bumpy ride with ups and downs here and there where it worked better or worse. But I just started to feel like if I'm going to be given this rare gift of standing in front, on a stage, standing in front of a group of people every single night of the week. I mean, I was doing, just 15-minute spots, but 3 shows every night in New York City of the week. And you're doing 3 shows a night. And it's like, you've got 100 people in front of you, at least every single show. I got to talk about something real. It can't just be jokes about vending machines. And I started merging the two, and I really felt like I was, it was a different kind of laugh. You might be getting slightly fewer laughs at times, but it was a different kind of laugh. It was a laugh of awareness from the audience, of a reality, rather than just, the softball stuff. And it grew from there. And but like with, Randy didn't exactly say this, but once you make that choice to really be political, and especially be political and go outside of the corporate allowed talking points that are allowed on our mainstream airwaves, then you are basically a leper to Hollywood. You are not invited on these late night shows. Randy mentioned that he was on the Tonight Show, and he was. But like he said, he talked about our policies in Nicaragua. I believe he called Nancy Reagan Ava Braun, and he was not invited back to the Tonight Show.
Jane Kirkpatrick.
What's that?
Jane Kirkpatrick.
Oh, okay. But he was not invited back to the Tonight Show. And that is standard operating procedure for when they find out you're not going to play the game. You're going outside of the acceptable talking points for our corporate airwaves. And, another one that I think is kind of similar is Rick Overton did his, it was either HBO or Showtime special, and really called a lot of this politics to account. And, as far as I know, never got another special. He's done wonderful things, but if you're going to talk about those issues outside of what's acceptable on CNN, then you are not welcome there. And the same has happened to me. I mean, luckily, I've found an outlet for my comedy, both on YouTube and RT and Consortium News and others, but it's not in the mainstream airwaves. And there's a reason for that. And, many of the people the famous comedians that we know who got on those airwaves, they got on those airwaves doing less political stuff like Carlin and Pryor. And then once they were super famous, then they became increasingly political and increasingly scary to the power elite. And they're, pushed out to a greater or lesser extent. Carlin luckily found HBO, and his fame was so immense at that point that it's tough to say no to him. But they're not going to take a chance on a new guy, saying things that are not acceptable to corporate America.
Well said, man. That's well said.
So even comedy has got its limits, right, in the system. Ron, tell us how you got involved with politics and comedy together.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I got to mention, give a shout out to the Diogenes Shoutout. I'm a big Diogenes guy too. And, look, that guy was working before Christ. And when he was caught masturbating in public, he said, hey, you know what? If only rubbing one's belly relieved hunger, we'd live in a better world. I don't think anyone has been as quick on their toes since. I really don't. No one's topped that. So shout out for the Diogenes plug. But I'm a little different. I got really into politics when I was in college. This was around the Iraq War. Friends of mine were getting sent over there. I didn't know why we were over there. I wasn't really paying attention to the world around me before that. When I was in high school, I just kind of, played in bands and whatever and didn't really notice much about the world around me. But come college, I was wondering why we were over in Iraq. It didn't make any sense to me. And so I started reading Noam Chomsky and Saul Alinsky, and the lid was off. And then I got into comedy a little bit after that. I mean, I wanted to, do something in performance with protest, and I got really into the anti-folk scene in New York City. I didn't live in New York City. I went to college in Bloomington, Indiana, but I was really fascinated by that scene, and with the internet, I could kind of pay attention to it. So I did this kind of like one-man singer-songwritery thing, and eventually I was realizing that I measured the success of the show by how much laughter my in-between banter got, more so than anything else. And my songs were like intentionally funny too.
Same as
so
Billy Connolly. Billy Connolly.
Yeah. So eventually I just said, well, I think I should be doing stand-up, and that's kind of how I started stand-up. So.
Wow, you really like Diogenes. Let me just kind of throw this in. I knew that. I mean, you're a Diogenes fan, right, Ron?
Yeah, I wrote about him in grad school some too. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I mean, the guy was a great like prankster, comic, right?
He was. Yeah, he was.
He went door to door with a lamp or with a lantern, looking for an honest person.
Looking for an honest man.
Yeah, and he also when he set free his slave, had one slave. He said the slave was named Manus. I said, "Why did you set him free?" He said, "Manus can live without me. Why can't I live without Manus?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's all sorts of stunts. The one with the belly there was it's a true story, and it's Diogenes Asinope. I think there's like two Diogenes. Look him up. He was quite a character, and there's no one since that really has been like that guy. Would you say that, Ron?
Yeah, he was something else, man. I actually, in a different life, I was in grad school, and I actually wrote a paper about Diogenes, like saying how he was the first comedian, basically. And it's, I'll have to find it, but it got published, and it's kind of funny. It's in a textbook somewhere. And the only reason I know this is because my old colleague from graduate school sent me like a screenshot of it. They used an article I wrote in some communication textbook, and it was a Diogenes article. And I read the questions afterwards, and these are like the reading questions that you see in a textbook. And I read one of the questions, and it was like, "What does Placone infer?" and da 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 da. And it was a trippy experience because I realized I had no fucking clue what the answer to that question was. Like, I read the question and I was like, I wrote this thing. I have no idea what they're even asking. I don't know what I was thinking. I have no idea. I guess any student can say he doesn't fucking know, and you'd have to give them an A because I'm the guy. I don't fucking know. Still don't know the answer to that question.
Well, just want to say one last thing. In 2009, I went up to Albany dressed up as Diogenes there was a state senate meeting on ethics, and I walked in with the toga and like this mask and everything. I had the lantern and I had the walking stick, and the AP took a picture of it. It was on Greek TV that I was there looking for an honest politician in Albany, and that's when I really got. And I started doing Diogenes all the time. When I met Lee at Occupy Wall Street, I was walking around a lot as Diogenes. So I'm really happy that you are a Diogenes fan. Seriously, and everyone should get into him. Am I right?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the thing is there's only so much you can really like dive into because he was against writing. So like, there's only so like he wasn't a fan of that. So there's so many books out there, and there's only so many firsthand writings that are out there. A lot of them are secondhand stories about him, about the pranks that he would do. Like you mentioned a couple. I mean, one of my favorite ones was, his only possession was he would like carry around an onion that he would eat. And then he had like just a bathtub that he kind of lived in. And whenever there there was like a big, I don't know if it was a hurricane or what it was, or just a big storm or something in the city. And everybody was like covering up the marketplace and stuff like that. And he was just running around with his bathtub. And they were like, Diogenes, what are you doing? And he's like, I just want to look busy like you guys. I don't have anything else to do. So I'm just moving my bathtub. But yeah, he's one of a kind.
That's true. I've forgotten all about that. He was only into the oral tradition, which was Homer was into the oral tradition, and he did not believe in writing. Everything he did was impromptu or extemporized.
Yeah, I think eventually.
I was going to say, I would imagine he was influential or an inspiration to like Abby Hoffman and the Yippies with all of their kind of activism stunts that were comedic and in gesture. And I know Kunstler represented them in the Chicago 7, but they did things like show up in the judges' robes and then take the robes off and have on cop uniforms. And they did my favorite prank ever was dumping the dollar bills off of the balcony in the stock exchange and watching the investors scramble to grab the money. They did some brilliant stuff.
Yeah, it's true, man. That's a good. I think you're right, Lee. I think that maybe Diogenes. I know he influenced me, but he probably influenced Abby Hoffman. I should have asked him when I was doing acid and smoking a joint with him at the New York Comedy Club on 78th Street back in 1969. But I didn't.
What was Abby Hoffman like?
Abby Hoffman, I met him through Kunstler. I met Kunstler through Joy Heatherton. Kunstler became my closest, like a godfather to me. I moved into his house, and within a few months of meeting him, we went to this place on Gay Street and Christopher, forgot the name of it, with Abby Hoffman. And Abby Hoffman came back to Kunstler's, and we smoked a couple of bones. And the guy was great. This is 1986, And then he started doing stand-up comedy. And I worked with him at the New York Comedy Club, I think it was called that, the one on 78th Street and Broadway. But he was a great guy, man. This is way after he was exonerated or he was exculpated from that drug charge. But Bill Kunstler thought he was the real deal. He really didn't like Tom Hayden, but he really liked this guy, Abby Hoffman, who was the real deal. When you met him, you knew this guy was a serious guy and a serious performer, a serious political satirist. You saw him. You saw the Chicago 7 movie, right?
Yeah, the new one. Well, there's a new one and an old one.
Him, man. There's much better material out there that would underscore the kind of personality that Abby Hoffman was. He was a great man. And there's been very few like him since.
Yeah, I read it when I discovered him, which was a little late, probably 25 or something. I read all his books, and yeah, he was wonderful.
And Bill Kunstler too. Bill Kunstler, the last performance he did, 1995, a month before he died, I dragged him into Caroline's Comedy Club to do, because I said that, I went on the book tour with him in 1995, his autobiography. For like 8 months. And I said, these stories that you are telling in San Francisco, Seattle, LA, Chicago are so incredible. And they're humorous. Guy had a great sense of humor. So I got him to do something at Caroline's Comedy Club. I emceed it. There was a ragtime jazz quartet by Terry Waldo, and Irwin Corey was the middle act. I was the MC. Irwin Corey was the middle act, and Bill Kunstler, I'm gonna send it to Joe to put it on his website. He did 45 minutes and got a standing ovation in a sold out room, just like telling these stories from the Chicago 7. And what you see in the movie on Netflix, it doesn't really represent the kind of character Bill Kunstler was. He did the best Sidney Greenstreet impression. And in this documentary, in this Caroline's video, you have him and I in the back room that Entertainment Tonight got, him doing Sidney Greenstreet and me doing Humphrey Bogart from Maltese Falcon. So he had an incredible sense of humor, and he was a World War II hero that he would never talk about, and he spoke fluent French, and he knew opera as well as anybody, but he had a great sense of humor. And you could tell You could tell they did a great. How you doing there, Joe? I'm sorry if I'm robbing too much. I'm going to leave. I'm going to take a vacation now and let the other ones talk.
We have a lot more ground to cover because we started in 5 BC talking about Diogenes, and then we like hopped up to the 60s and 70s. We got a lot of we got to go back and then.
No, we're moving from the ancient world to the 70s, and now Erwin Corey, didn't he run for president, Randy? Just a segue.
Yeah, he did. He did it. Listen, I ran for governor. I ran for senator against Schumer, and I ran for mayor against de Blasio. I did it as performance art because I don't take any politician seriously. I don't take like Lee, you can't take these elections seriously. Who gets into it? You know what I mean? But I did 3 different times, the same way. Who was it, Lee, that ran way back from the Smothers Brothers show? What was his name?
Oh, God, I don't know. I know the Smothers Brothers I'm glad you bring them up. They're a great example of a comedy team, hugely successful, but they went beyond what's allowable on your corporate airwaves and got canceled.
Right. So I forgot who it was, but yes, I've run for office. Erwin Corey was one of the great political satirists of our time. He's in that film with Bill Kunstler. He never made a lot of money, that guy, but he made it in the stock market. He didn't make it as a performer. He said the best year he had was $65,000, and he owned 9 buildings in New York from the stock market. But Erwin Corey was a great political satirist. He got fucked by not only Johnny Carson, but by Dave Letterman for his political comedy on their shows. They say, hey, look, you got to get rid of these guys, man. They couldn't put those people on. Dave Letterman, they cut off Bill Hicks. Dave Letterman fucked Bill Hicks, all right? And he never made up for it. I did Bill Hicks's eulogy at Caroline's in 1994-95. And I talked about the fact that fucking Letterman and his writers allowed Bill Hicks to be censored on that show. What he was saying.
It turned out to be his final show.
It was his last show, yeah. And he died of liver cancer. And, you know, he was a great guy. And he and I were very good friends. And I was furious that Letterman, you know, he should have taken the high road and said, look, I don't give a fuck about the $3 million I make a year. You know what I mean? I don't give a fuck. He let that guy, John, who was the attorney general under Bush, John Ashcroft, on. He let him on in 2002 to trash Len Stewart, and he gave the guy a big standing ovation. This is something that yes,
Randy, what you're speaking to is absolutely something that's throughout our media in this country, which is they will sit down and allow war criminals to speak to them calmly as long as they're one of the ruling elite, one of the oligarchy. You know, the NPR did a hit piece on me where they refused to give me a live interview on it. And the following week gave a live interview to Karl Rove. So that is like standard operating procedure. A comedian can't be allowed on their airwaves to say something that, you know, could insult the ruling elite, but they'll have those same war criminals on next week to talk about how great they are. And I just want to say for those viewers who might have never heard of Bill Hicks, might not know much about him, he's the photo that's up above my shoulder here.
Wow, that's a great photo. That really is. And so
well,
look, I
just
admire the fact that you guys both, that you and Ron are like in the Bill Hicks tradition, continue, you know, fighting against the system. Go ahead, Ron. I'm looking at you right.
I was just going to say, for transparency's sake, Letterman he later finally did air that segment, and he apologized.
Like last year.
Yeah, like last year, and he apologized. No, it was too little, too late. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like he did air it, and he apologized to Bill's mom. It was way too little, way too late, but it did happen. Just in case anyone at home's like, well, technically, like, all right, we're covering the technicality.
Well, what do you think the pressure is, Ron? And I know that Joe, you're supposed to be emceeing this, but I just want to ask Ron, what do you think inspired him not to do it way back then, or what prevented Letterman from airing that show? Why did he buckle to the network sponsors?
My guess is because they signed his paycheck and he didn't want to rock the boat. I mean, that's my guess.
And it
I
had to
mean,
do with Christian viewers. It was an abortion joke, I believe, which
mhm.
was the main reason they cut it.
Since we're discussing censorship in general, in a general sense, I wanted to ask you all about the worst experience of censorship you've had specifically, just to kind of inform our viewers as to how bad that is, even when you are, as you all are, outside the kind of corporate standard framework and outside that kind of repression.
I was physically thrown out of Fox News. I actually was never physically thrown out, although they claimed on air I was. So they wanted their viewers to think I'd been physically booted from the building. But I went on, the only time I was ever on Fox News, I called them a parade of propaganda and a festival of ignorance. And they then went to cut to commercial break, came back in after the break and said we had to remove him from the building, which was not true. I just walked out. But a kind of, that's to be expected. The one that was not to be expected, at least for me at the time, was I was a writer for Huffington Post's comedy page. And this is back when Huffington Post was one of the biggest things on the internet. They were going, viral on a regular basis. And they had a comedy staff. They actually had a comedy page with a real paid comedy staff. Believe it or not, they used to pay people. And I would write pieces for them and get paid for it. And then the moment they sold, I can't remember who they sold to or whatever, merged with
AOL.
AOL, you're right, AOL. The following week I sent in, and I was no longer being paid, but I would occasionally send stuff in anyway. I sent in a piece calling Donald Rumsfeld a war criminal, and they said that is beyond what they're willing to say. So that was the point I knew, wow, Huffington Post is basically just defending the ruling elite. Doesn't matter who they are, what they're standing for. They can't be called war criminals.
Well,
Ron, how about
God
you?
bless you for doing that from an atheist.
I mean, I can't think of like a specific like one, for instance, that's like the big, like this is the big moment, but just the little subtle things here and there. I mean, there was the Adpocalypse on YouTube where they really, anyone speaking truth to power, stuff outside of the corporate narrative got pretty much completely demonetized overnight. And that's something that is still happening. I once was on a show where, I was kind of getting into it some with the host, and I kind of knew that it was going to be my last time on the show. And I said single payer now as my sign off, and they edited that out. They did not air me saying single payer now. That was too risque. The whole idea of everyone having healthcare, way too risque. And, and then just more kind of systemic things. I used to do when I was on the road, I did a lot of colleges. And, as I became more political, and I know, Lee, you have this issue too. As I became more political, it was harder to do colleges. And I was even billed as a political act, and it was still harder and harder. And it got to the point where, I occasionally will still do some campuses, but it's because they know who I am and they reach out to me. My agent pretty much said, like, we can't really promote you to student activities anymore. It's just and it's not even because of how outspoken I am. It's because they're just scared of anything political at all. Like, they're just saying, like, they don't want to do anything that would, challenge any preconceived notions, which in something like academia, that's a very disturbing trend.
Well, and it's also kind of funny because any comedians playing colleges, there's, going to be a preponderance of kind of, jokes about women's tits or whatever it is, kind of garbage comedy. Like, that is all acceptable. Mm-hmm. That's all fine. But when you say, that America has killed a bunch of children, that is over the edge.
That's too far. We're bombing 9 countries. All right, you're out of here.
It's always been difficult, man. It has always been difficult. When I was on the Tonight Show talking about the war in Nicaragua, and I went down to Nicaragua, I went around and I did shows down there, and I went to funerals, and I saw families who lost their kids. There's 60,000 between the time I went down there at the time that I left. And so what do? Barry Crimmins went there with me one time. And in the documentary on him, I'm going to cry thinking about it. He met a kid that was missing all four extremities in a hospital because of a U.S. mine down there, Barry Crimmins. And so he talked about that in the documentary on him, Call Me Lucky. He talks about his trip to Nicaragua. And we were doing that. We were killing people there. And, when you see these fucking assholes on CNN and MSNBC, Michael Breslov and these other historians, Doris Kearns Goodwin, and talking about Reagan and Bush and these grandiose speeches and how they rose for the occasion. They never bring up the fucking fact that there were so many people murdered and maimed during Reagan's time, during George Bush's, the first time, Clinton's time. These guys were great presidents that rose to the occasion. Yeah, fucking Trump is a fucking asshole and a horrible human being. But don't put them up to these people as if those speeches that they made in a time of crisis made them fucking great people. We're talking about when Barry and I were there, we saw people that were murdered, killed by the Contras. That Reagan, don't ever tell me that Reagan was a great speaker that unified the fucking nation. All right? Seriously. So look, it's been bad for 250 fucking years, man, in this country. There isn't a great fucking president. Everything you got to go back and go to those times and say, those guys were the head people of capitalism going way back to 1788. Whether it be Washington, Adams, all the way to Lincoln, go back and really look at their fucking records. There's never been a great fucking president because they preside over a decayed fucking system, which is capitalism in this country. And, I don't want to go, I don't even know how I got there talking about this, but, let's be honest, man, it's all revisionism about those great people in the past.
Randy, you're just reminding me. I just want to let you know how important it was to me to even know that guys like you and Barry Crimmins, when I discovered you, that you even existed. It was just knowing that there were other comedians that had done these incredible, activism. It was so powerful to me. And, with the Zapatistas and everything, it was just finding out that you existed in the world was you and Barry was just incredible to me.
Well, thank you very much. And I say, what's really good is that I know that you're 20 years younger than me, and so is Ron. And the fact is that there are people out there that are carrying this torch. There are people willing, because I know you can make a lot more money than being as a stand-up comic, even before the COVID crisis. And Ron can make a lot more money. But the fact is that you put your principles ahead of the principle and your in the stock market and in your bank account, that you guys are out there fighting the good fight. And it's great. Barry Crimmins should be thrilled by this, that there are people that are doing this at this point in time. And you can only say, look, we hope that you two inspire the next generation, because we got to, and others right now, to do what you are doing. And that's all I can say about that. And thank you for the stroke there. But I was inspired by Dick Gregory. I was inspired by this great, there's a great guy during the Paris Commune by the name of Henry Roquefort, all right, who from the time that Louis Napoleon came into office in 1850 up until the time that he was deposed, and up through the Paris Commune, Roquefort was the writer and the editor of The Lantern. He was a satirist, a hardcore left-wing satirist. And when it was all over, he was deported from Paris to New Caledonia. And there's a great painting by Monet of the escape from New Caledonia of Roquefort. The fact that this guy was sacrificed, he could have made $1 trillion fucking dollars, but he fought against it. You are doing it right now. Look, I know how you, Lee, are being muffled with RT and others.
Artheism.
It's like guys like Larry King, man. I mean, the people that work at RT, I promote it all the time, man. You've got George Galloway. You've got this great guy, Afshin Ratanzi at RT. It's like I get
Hedges.
real fucking Chris Hedges. I get real fucking news from and real analysis from RT. And they are looking to snuff you guys out. It's fucking unbelievable.
So Randy and Ron and Lee, there's in 11 days, there's an election in the United States.
Really?
What?
I
What?
don't know if you
I
heard
didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm not sure who's running, but is there anything particularly funny about this one, or we should just laugh because to avoid crying?
I don't know. I think we should all take a shot at this. Lee, why don't you go first?
Well, I have honestly gone after these guys for years. I was, before Trump ever got elected, I was calling him far more awful things than CNN was. So it's kind of comedic that they, these liberal assholes in the mainstream want to claim that RT's pro-Trump or something. Meanwhile, I've been calling Trump worse things than they ever would. And then I've gone after Biden endlessly. Before Biden ever won the primary or anything, I was talking about what a horrific choice he would ever be, and the horrible things he's done over the course of his career. But to me, at the end of it, it's like the only interesting thing to me is largely comedy that's attacking the larger corporate state structure. It's just so been bought out and destroyed. To me, that's what's fascinating. Trump jokes, even though I partook in a few in the early days, they've gotten old quick, as I assume they would. And I just don't feel that, Trump and Biden jokes, other than a slight mention here and there, are really worth it. Whereas, you turn on Stephen Colbert, who's I think back with the Colbert Report was one of the best comedians in America, but it's just an endless brigade of Trump jokes, which is not, to me, it's not fascinating. It's not interesting.
Very good. Listen, I concur with you, but I'm not going to go next. I want Ron to answer that question.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, there are bigger societal things happening. As far as Trump and Biden, I'm not a fan of either candidate at all. I don't like the idea of voting for either candidate at all for a lot of reasons. One of the big reasons being I have a cat. I already spend enough time checking a box for a piece of shit. I don't feel like doing it again in November. But, I just, and it's like we keep the oligarchy where you have Wall Street who has purchased both teams. They own both teams. They own the team with the R next to their name and the team with the D next to their name. And it's getting to a point where you're picking between neo-fascist or neocon. At the rate we're going now, I think by 2028, Don Jr. is going to run as a Democrat. The Republicans are going to run a Mussolini hologram or something like that. And that's a systemic thing. So, I'm with Lee that the systemic issue is way more interesting to talk about. And I like the fact that you bring up Colbert, too, because it seems like only yesterday where Stephen Colbert, when he was doing that character, was calling out Barack Obama for being too conservative. Stephen Colbert had that joke where he's like, man, it's getting to the point where the only moderate Republican on the stage is going to be Barack Obama. That was a Stephen Colbert joke. He would not make that joke today at all. He has changed very much.
Speaking of changed comedians, Dennis Miller had a joke in I don't know if it was 89 or 94 or something on one of his specials where I don't even remember the beginning of the joke, but the end of the joke was, that's as hard to find as Republicans care for their victims. And here he is today.
Here he is today. He had a much different Fox News experience than you did.
Yeah.
Right. And Monday Night Football, too. Look, I don't even know where to go with this. I know that we are at a crisis right now. I have a show, by the way, and I got to mention this, on WBAI 99.5 FM in New York City, Free Speech Radio, as long as it stays alive. And I do it every Wednesday at 2:30. We have, it's very difficult right now. Trump jokes are, it's like with Reagan, you really didn't have to write for them. You would just repeat what they would say. As a political satirist, you would just repeat what they say. And so we are at a very, very complicated crisis right now between capitalism, as Lee has pointed out. And you go to Lee's Twitter account, you will see it's almost like Karl Marx writing there, is that capitalism is the fucking problem. And I say it as a compliment, right? That capitalism, we are in a very decayed system, period right now. You've got Donald Trump versus, Joe Biden, who represents capitalism, the old guard. And people will always say, well, this is going to be the Weimar Republic. Weimar Republic had a deep state. Let me tell you, Weimar Republic from 1919 to 1933 had a deep state. Anyone that knows anything about the Weimar Republic, that reads about it, had a deep state. Leftists were, it was liberal. It was liberal. If you look at Cabaret, the movie, it was a liberal with drugs and all of that, but politically it was not. All right. And so you got to the point in 32 where you had Hitler, who scared everybody, and they brought in an 84-year-old fucking man by the name of Hindenburg to stop Hitler. And no one thought that Hitler was going to do what he did. All right. And he did what he did later on. And there were those that, I guess, Joel Grey from Cabaret would make some jokes about Hindenburg because he was 84 fucking years old and a doddering motherfucker. Okay. But it was like, all right, we got to forestall this. At this point, they put in a fucking guy like him. Joe Biden is the Hindenburg of this time because the old guard, the junkers, or whatever you want to call them, they don't want this guy because they don't trust him. Look, I don't like to use Nazi references at all, but I really don't. But if you go to these people that these militias out there, the ones that are going to show up on election day, you cannot dismiss that. You can't dismiss that. Yes, Biden is the fucking worst thing that could happen, man. If he were except for the other guy is worse. All right. That's all I can say. I would, and so how do you make that funny? How do I make that funny and try to sell it? It's difficult. When I look at the people that show up at these fucking rallies, it's not Trump that you have to burlesque. It's the people that show up at these rallies that you have to burlesque, I think. But, I have no fucking clue, except for I am personally nervous. I'm doing a show this week because I hate fucking Andrew Cuomo and what he's doing in the state of New York. State of New York, he's trying to eliminate all third parties with this maneuver that he put in, which is going to cost his buddy Joe Biden some votes. And so I have to go from voting. I was going to vote for Biden. Now I'm going to vote for my Green Party friend, Howie Hawkins, in the state of New York to preserve the fucking party. That's what I'm going to do in the state of New York. Andrew Cuomo cost his buddy by the name of Joe Biden a lot of us. Joe Biden is a fucking piece of shit. How the fuck can I stand here and say that I'm going to vote for Joe Biden when I look at the fucking crime bill, the fact that he brought in Clarence Thomas? There's nothing fucking good about this motherfucker. I've been propping the cocksucker up now for the last 5 fucking months saying, all right, we got to go with Biden. But look at him, man. It's the worst. It's like having a guy that it's like being there for Charles Manson and looking for some good fucking things that he's done in the past. Manson, how the fuck can I support Joe Biden when you look at his fucking past, man? His record is complete shit. There's nothing redeeming about it. But the other guy's worse. That's the only thing you can say, is that the other guy is worse. And that's what how do you make this funny there, Joe? How do you make this funny, Lee? How do you make this funny, Ron?
Just did. Well, how about doing some impersonations? If you got a Biden and a Trump, or you didn't bother?
Look, man, I'm so fucking old now. It's like Sammy Davis Jr. did great impressions. they said to him, "Why did you stop doing impressions?" He says, "Man, it is difficult, man, to keep up with. I used to do Reagan. I did the Nixon way back then. I did Hubert H. Humphrey. I did Bill Clinton. I did all these guys. George Bush. God bless America. America's the greatest nation in the land. I did all of these people back then. And you know what? It's fucking hard to keep up with them. And then why would I do Trump when, what am I going to do with him? The fact is that you can't, there's no way you can make it any funnier than what he says. Am I right, Lee?
You're absolutely right. Actually, there was a viral clip recently. You were talking about the people that come to his rallies. There was a viral clip of interviews with the people coming to his rallies, and it was better than any SNL sketch you've ever seen. It was like, they're literally, one of the women goes, "They tell us to wear masks, but I can't breathe in a mask. So George Floyd says I can't breathe, and it's a big deal. But I say I can't breathe, and no one cares."
Oh,
and I was like, that's
wow.
incredible.
Wow. Well, I got to admit, every now and again, it's not beneath me to do a Biden impression every now and again. And, I have a pandemic-related Biden impression. Here's my Biden impression. You guys ready for it? All right. Yeah. So it's like, you just had me on the show. So, yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate you having me here. And he doesn't know how to look at a web camera. He doesn't know how to do it. So that's my Biden impression.
That's pretty good, man.
You just wander off. You're just like, yeah, this is really cool that you have me. We're doing this live stream.
Yeah. Well, listen, I the guy's horrible, and I'm sitting there praying for him. I'm at that point. Maybe I got Trump TDS, but when I look at this new Supreme Court nominee that's going to get through on Monday, there's going to be 6-3 from this point on, man. Mm-hmm. And then I'm reading the rise and fall of the Third Reich here. All right. And it's like, I hate to use Nazi references, or if I read this book about Mussolini and the way they use, they totally pack the court, how they fuck the press. And remember, this is the guy, this is the president and William Barr that are fucking Julian Assange. All right. Oh, yeah. Obama decided not to do it. As bad as Obama was, with the Espionage Act, and put a lot of good people in prison, and is a horrible motherfucker for it. But he decided that he couldn't go after Assange, and it is this president that's going after Julian Assange, the most famous, the most important, the most significant journalist in the last 50 years. All right, so he's going after him, and when he knocks him over, who's next? So I don't know why he's doing this, but he is doing it, and we have to take notice of that. And if you support Julian Assange, like, I know you've been on this, and I remember back in February, Joe, in London, that I interviewed there with CN, and I've done 43 shows this year, and he's not a popular figure in the U.S. You understand that? That Julian Assange is the most difficult fucking case to sell in the U.S., man. This is not easy. Not like you can make a lot of money like doing a Julian Assange show, all right? So it's a difficult case, but it's an important case, maybe the most important case in terms of journalism. And Trump, let's remember, is the guy that's going after him and wants to put him in that fucking prison in Colorado. And I will now, as Jimmy Stewart would say, I will now yield. I will now yield to Lee Camp. Yeah, the senator will yield to Lee Camp.
Well, yeah, I've ranted on Consortium News live streams before about Julian Assange, so I guess I don't need to get into all that. But it absolutely is true that Trump's the one. Trump and Pompeo are trying to destroy him, and Obama. Really, all Obama did was decide that he couldn't breach the Ecuadorian embassy to get Assange, but obviously he tortured Chelsea Manning. Yes, he ultimately commuted her, but after torturing her for years. So I don't think you can high five him for that.
I didn't.
No, I didn't mean you. No, I didn't mean you. I didn't mean you. But others, want to say, well, he let her out. It's like, yeah, but he also was fucking president when she was tortured and prosecuted. So it's despicable on all levels.
Can I just jump in now, Ron and then Lee? How are you able at this point to be humorous tell jokes at this particular point in time when you have candidates like Biden and candidates like Trump? How are you able to tell what is the formula that you use? I'll go with you first, Ron.
I don't know how to do anything else, really. I mean, I really don't. If I didn't live tweet the debates, and if I didn't, kind of engage with it and just kind of critique the system as a whole and just look at the absurdity of, how ridiculous it's gotten that these are our choices, I'd probably go insane. I wouldn't be, because sometimes I don't feel like being funny about it. And I just kind of yell, and my wife has to listen. And she goes, "Why don't you try being funny about it?" And I'm like, "Good call." And then I try to do that, and it makes me feel better.
Lee, I don't want to take Joe's spot here as the MC, but
we just walk Joe. We walk Joe.
We walk Joe.
Go ahead. No, Joe is cool, man. He's able to kind of like riff on this thing and allow me to riff for him. So tell me, how do you do it, Lee?
Well, I was going to use the same words as Ron. I was going to go, I don't know what else to do. It's so fucking ugly. Honestly, it keeps me sane. And I know some fans tell me, and I'm sure I've told you guys that it keeps them sane too. You have to laugh so as not to cry, but these are incredibly depressing times. But I think it helps people kind of understand these things, because these things can get so immense and so complicated. And so in creating jokes, you were also shrinking things down to a kind of understandable soundbite. And I think that is an important action that we provide, as well as just the kind of joke release. But I also, you can do, like, I don't think Colbert Report is quite as impressive as it was as comedic skill. I don't think it actually changed many minds, because it came off as saying basically it's all a joke, forget about it. And actually that was Jon Stewart's final words in the Rally for Sanity, right? Just be nice to each other and go home. And I try and make it clear at the end of each segment of mine, or within it, that despite the jokes, there's a clear point of view, and there's a clear stance and a clear action that needs to be taken. I don't want people to walk away from the jokes or the comedy or the satire and go, "Oh, it's all a joke. I can just stop paying attention now."
Joe, if you don't mind, I want to ask him. You keep bringing up Colbert.
Joe's gone.
Is there Colbert an analysis of capitalism and the structural problems of the U.S. system? Does he ever bring that out, flesh that out during his comedy routine?
No, I don't think he says the word capitalism. I don't think any of them do. There is no analysis of the deeper systems at play here. None whatsoever. It's pretty rare that they even say the word systemic racism. It is, I think it's both a lack of, curiosity, a lack of understanding, but combined with an understanding that if they were to go there, if they were to say we have a corporate run state, that's basically the end of their show.
So he can only go he's only got so much. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ron.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, the only time I hear the word capitalism brought up on kind of the more corporate comedy shows is if they're defending it, which is something you hear Bill Maher do some. But, and it's funny because if we were all like, let's say we didn't know anything we know about the world, and it was a completely different place, and there was just this meeting of 5 or 6 people to decide how to run a polis, and we didn't know any of the things that we had in history. If somebody described capitalism, everybody else in the meeting would think that person was absolutely insane. Like, hey, how should we run our city? I have this idea. What if we do this thing where these places, they make a lot of money, and then there's this place that has a bunch of money anyway, and then they bet on how much money these other things are going to make, and then from that money, they make more bets, and then they make money on the bets that they make on the bets, on the bets, on the bets, on the bets, to make more money, and then at the end of the day, a couple shareholders get more money. And we don't really share it with the workers too much because then the shareholders get more money. Everyone would be like, you know what, Steve, we'd appreciate it if you left the meeting. You're really creeping everybody out.
All right, listen,
You know,
I'm going to take it back to Joe Lauria. Let me just say one thing about Joe Lauria. Joe Lauria, you do a great job. Joe is the editor of Consortium News, and I think it's a great outfit. And Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
No, ask me a question, Randy. Go ahead. You're running the show. Ask me a question. No, I'm kidding. I think the saddest thing I heard is that this election coming up is such a joke that you can't make any about it because it's just too absurd to make jokes about. I think that's pretty sad. But on this 1992 Charlie Rose show, Randy, where you were on with Will Durst and Richard Belzer, they asked Charlie Rose, who had a habit of his hand coming off the table, and
right.
He was out. He was really out to lunch, this guy. But
his other hand was on his pants.
Right. Well, yes, from what I understand. But I think Charlie usually answered he used to ask a question and then answer himself, and the interviewer didn't know what was going on. But in this show, he let you guys speak, and he asked you all to predict who was going to win, and you were the only one who said Bill Clinton. This was the '92 election. You said,
well, listen, the guy fucking hated me. Charlie Rose hated me. I was brought in there. You know, Belzer's not really a political satirist. Belzer is a stand-up comic. The woman that was the producer brought me in like a Trojan horse to get in there and talk about some fucking issues. I remember I talked about the McLaughlin group. I said they had 5 points of view, the McLaughlin group: the right, the far right, the extreme right, the fascist right, and the Third Reich. That's what I said on that show. And that guy was such a cold motherfucker, Charlie Rose, because he knew my politics. Belzer wasn't a left winger; he was a stand-up comic. And what's his name? More of a political satirist, Will Durst, and there was somebody else on. But I knew the guy didn't like me from the very beginning. And look, that was in '92. And at that time, I was actually working with, and I hate to say it, on the campaign of Jerry Brown against Bill Clinton. And then when it was over, then they asked me to do the show. And then, of course, I did my Bill Clinton impression. I knew the guy was a horrible motherfucker back then. But the thing is, I could do his voice. I did a great Ross Perot as well. Americans, we got to fight this thing. I did a great America. And then I did my George Bush impression. We are not at war with the people of Iraq. We are at war with the Iraqi people. Never have so few. Whatever. That was my great impression back then. He couldn't even say Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hassan is going in. He's like Hitler. He's going into Poland. Whatever it was. But let me get away with some of that. But Charlie Rose was not amused. He was a reactionary back then. And the fact is that Belzer brought me in, and I got to do the show. And then I got to do a lot of blow with him 5 years later on his HBO show. And, look, that was '92. That was way back in '92. Tonight Show, when I attacked Gene Kirkpatrick and the U.S. War in Nicaragua, the 60,000 people dying, they didn't like that as well. And neither did my uncle, who owned 8 cruise ships in Miami and cut me out of the will because he was a big fan of Gene Kirkpatrick. And he had no other kids. And he said, I'm cutting you out of the fucking will because of that one line. It was a big mistake for me, I suppose. But you know what? How much more time do I have? I'm 66, man. I don't want to live as old as Diogenes, man. All right? I got a dog.
That's right. He had a long run. That was the other thing about him. Yeah, he was like 90 something, wasn't he?
Yeah. I don't want to live that fucking long. Seriously, man. I don't want to live like who was it? Some of these guys that lived to be 93, and H.G. Wells, these guys, anti-Semites like H.G. Wells.
Well, I know one guy's worse than the other, but you predicted Clinton, and you were right. You're the only one.
Yeah, I'm predicting that Trump wins on Tuesday.
Okay, what about you, Lee? What's your prediction?
Oh, God. I think it's far closer than they think, because I think these polls are garbage because they don't account for the millions that have been knocked off the voter rolls. So I'd say that you probably end up that it's close enough that you could end up with chaos, in which case Trump will declare victory. And at that point, all bets are off. But let's hope it's not that close so that we don't have America in chaos.
What about you, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, things change so much right now. I think if the election were like completely just tallied up right at this very second, I think Biden would win by a small amount, but he would win. But I think there's still, I mean, there's still a lot of time given our current situation in the world between now and November 3rd. So yeah, I have a feeling Trump's not going anywhere.
No, I don't think so. And let me just say this: I think that Biden will win this, and if it's a plebiscite. This is not an election. This is, Germany when they had plebiscites, and this is Trump versus a piece of paper or a fucking dead fucking cat, and that's what it is. All right.
Well, the way I describe it, it's Donald Trump versus himself. And, it's like you're just seeing if Donald Trump will beat himself or not. And I do think Donald Trump is incompetent enough to beat himself. I think he proved that once and for all last night, actually. He does have the ability to beat himself.
What does that mean?
You
think he did well last night?
No. I think he proved last night that he is incompetent enough to beat himself.
God, I'm glad to hear you say that because, the four of us here, and Elizabeth there. I haven't heard her for a while. Does anybody want to see Trump win this election?
No.
Lee?
I'd like to see them have a duel, and each of them, kill each other.
No, but between the two, Lee, which one do you want to see win? Between the two.
Oh God, I'd sheepishly and really have to be pushed and have to be in a battleground state and have to have a gun to my head, and then I'd vote for Biden just because I don't know, because he maybe kind of believes climate change is real. I guess I don't know.
But wait a second, what do you think is going to happen if Trump gets another term?
You'd see the continued collapse of the American empire, but you'd see that either way, I think. I don't know.
Ron, what do you think is going to happen if Trump gets another term?
I think it's going to be bad. I mean, if Trump gets another term, the problem is, I think Chris Hedges put it best where he's just like, yeah, Trump is a huge threat and he is absolutely disgusting. The problem is Biden's not the solution either. And guess what? The climate's collapsing. So this isn't the time to mess around, with these two abhorrent choices. I'm just looking forward to it all being over so we at least know which type of enemy we're dealing with. Are we dealing with the enemy of a Trump or
Aren't you all bored with seeing Trump on television? Don't you want to see that come to an end?
Oh, yeah. Simply, if you were to ask me simply as like watching the bully lose the fight, that I'd enjoy. I'd enjoy that. If you were to just say, oh, the schoolyard bully is going to get his ass kicked, I'd sign up to watch that. So in that way, I would find it enjoyable.
That's it, man. We agree. We agree.
I agree with that.
We agree. Yes.
Thank you. Forever, or at least Randy can, but Lee has to go.
I got to run in a minute. Yeah.
Wait a second. Are you telling me that I did a filibuster here?
No, we enjoy. You have better stories than us, Randy.
I'm fucking 8,000 years old.
I never did blow with Belzer. I never did any blow with Belzer.
I never met Abby Hoffman.
Abby had great blow and he had great fun.
Well, I thank you all, you guys, for bringing us back to the Agora in Athens and to the 70s and briefly to this election. And we're going to see what's going to happen in a few days. So we're going to sign off now.
What about you, Joe? What do you think?
I can't say. We're a nonprofit for one thing, and I pretty much think that one is worse than the other. So we're in deep shit. That's what I would say. Whatever happens next Tuesday, November 3rd. We're going to
free Assange, right? Let's all say free Assange, man, because all four of us here, all five of us, Elizabeth, you, Joe, and Lee and Ron have been big supporters of Assange. Can we just get that chorus?
Sure.
Free Assange.
1, 2, 3.
Free Assange.
Assange.
For sure.
Free Assange.
That was almost in unison. We got a little lull going. That's inevitable.
Well,
Our barbershop quartet is gonna suck.
You got a haircut, Lee. All right.
Thank you so much for coming on, Randy, Lee, and Ron, and Elizabeth, and our producer, Kathy Vogan. And we're going to sign off with a video of 2 clips of an interview by Giordano Nani, who is the founder and creator of Juice Media in Australia. I think people in America are very familiar with those videos. He's done a bunch on the election, and he interviewed Chomsky, and he brought up this issue of politics and comedy. So we're going to sign off. Until next show, again, thank you to all our guests and our audience. This is Joe Loria for CN Live.
I wanted to ask you if you have some thoughts about satire, because the resistance to everything that you've mentioned is coming not just from political parties and activism, but satirists and comedians have also really taken up the challenge, and they're engaging with this. I know we certainly are, and a lot of people write to us and thank us for dealing with these issues that are not always easy to make comedy about, because they're very serious issues. I was wondering if you have a word for satirists, for people like us, and in the struggle, and what you think the role that satire plays in all of this.
It's a long tradition, a noble tradition. It goes back to court jesters in the most autocratic traditional government. And they were allowed a certain amount of latitude, and they were able to tell the powerful what the people really believed and wanted to hear, because this was considered just gestures. I'm not an expert, but I'm told that kabuki theater in Japan had a similar role, mocking the powerful from the standpoint of the people. One of my favorite examples is Mark Twain, great humorist. He wrote very powerful essays attacking the US invasion of the Philippines. Interestingly, they were mostly suppressed. He's one of the most popular writers in the country, but the work was suppressed for almost 100 years. We now have it. One of the things he was doing was satirizing the political and military leaders in the United States who were carrying out this murderous war. He got to somebody named General Funston, famous general, has a big statue in San Francisco. And he wrote at that point, "I'm stumped. I can't deal with Funston. He is satire incarnate. It's impossible to satirize him." I told you when I looked at the clip you sent me, I thought, okay, that's what you mean as the satire, because that's satire incarnate.
Hello, I'm from the U.S. government with an update on our pandemic response. In the space of just a few months, our "don't worry bro, it's just the flu" policy has gotten a shit ton of you killed. Some say this tragedy was inevitable, but actually, studies show that if we'd simply responded like other governments who listen to scientists instead of Chuck Woolery and the My Pillow guy, we could have prevented almost all of those deaths. Unfortunately for you, the amount of responsibility we take in doing our job comes to approximately fuck all, which is why we got more of you killed than 50 9/11s. Trump 2020. With a president like this, who needs terrorists? As part of our distract from how many of you were getting killed policy, we'll be telling you the real threat to America is minorities demanding not to be murdered by cops. And to make you feel safe, we've deployed a secret police force to kidnap people off your streets without probable cause. Some call that taking a dump on the Constitution, but we call it law and order. Thanks to all the well-armed militias cheering us on, as we literally do the one thing the Second Amendment was supposed to prevent. What's that? People are looting in the streets? Oh, darling. The real looting is the one we're doing right here. As part of our exploit this crisis to funnel wealth from the poor to the rich policy. Like, remember when we told you COVID was no big deal, so we could buy ourselves just enough time to sell off our personal stocks before the crash which we knew was coming? Phew. Or when we passed the biggest bailout package in history, which funneled shit tons to corporations and easily forgivable loans. We even gave billions to churches bankrupted by sex abuse scandals. Even the I Love Small Government Rand Institute got some of the loot. But hey, Hey, don't forget that single barely above minimum wage check we sent you. You know, the one you simply handed over to your landlord to pay the rent, who in turn handed it to a bank to pay their mortgage, which is how we laundered another $1 trillion to banks through the working class. Profits made, profits kept. Now millions of you face homelessness and 1 in 5 families are going hungry. But look on the bright side. Billionaires regained $500 billion of their wealth. We're not in this together. If you survive till November, be sure to re-elect us so we can get the rest of you killed in the looming climate and extinction crisis. You know, that other crisis we're ignoring and plan to profit from obscenely at your expense. Trump 2020. Fuck you. Of course, we realize that after lying to you, robbing you, and getting your loved ones killed, some of you might be contemplating not voting for us. But don't worry. That's why we've adopted our deregister millions of you policy, as well as our close polling stations, file lawsuits, and let's spread bullshit about voter fraud policy. And if that's still not enough, well, maybe we'll just cancel the election. Trump 2020. Now get back to work, America. Our stocks won't make themselves go up, you pieces of shit. God bless America, except Portland and Chicago. Authorized by the Department for Sacrificing School Teachers to the Great Bull God to make line go up.
Hello, I'm from the United States Postal Service. For more than 200 years, you've counted on us to deliver your mail on time. Neither rain, nor snow, nor sleet, nor hail has kept us from doing our job. But now, for the first time in history, there's something that does. Bullshit. Introducing our new Postmaster General, appointed by the President himself. Does he have experience in running a postal service? Of course not. But he has many years' experience in donating millions of dollars to these guys. That's what makes him perfectly qualified for running the Postal Service. Off a fucking cliff. In just a few weeks, he managed to slow our deliveries down to a trickle, dismantle mail sorting machines across the country, fire and reassign our executives to sow confusion, and abduct mailboxes from your neighborhood. Bullshit! Thankfully, the bullshit was so egregious that it brought the nation together for once, forcing this stooge to back off. For now, bullshit doesn't just hinder the brave workers of the Postal Service, many of whom have given their lives to keep delivering mail during a deadly pandemic. It also makes it harder for you to vote in the coming election, an election in which millions more will use mail-in ballots to avoid standing in line for hours at a polling station during a deadly pandemic. Does mail-in voting favor one party over another? No. In Colorado, where most people voted by mail, Republicans flipped a Senate seat and won a majority in the state Senate. Is it open to fraud? No. As this big sack of shit admitted under oath, there's no evidence for concern about mail-in ballot fraud. Even this coven of corporate edgelords has said so. Again, in states that mostly use mail-in voting, fraud affected only a handful of ballots out of millions cast. You know what does skew the results of an election? Not voting, which is what all this bullshit is designed to do by eroding your trust in mail-in voting. Bullshit! Some say we need more funding to do our job, but what we really need is less bullshit! And since there's little chance of that, here's how you can ensure your vote is counted in November. Remember how you learned to flatten the curve of the virus so our healthcare system could cope? Well, now it's time to flatten this curve to ensure your postal system can cope with the unprecedented demand for mail-in ballots. You can do this by following these simple steps. First, make sure to check your registered to vote. You can do that here. If your state allows it, vote early. If that entails requesting a mail-in ballot, request it today. Today. Complete your ballot carefully and mail it off as fast as possible to ensure we can get it in by your state's deadline. Late ballots won't be counted. Some states have drop boxes where you can take your ballot in person. Or fuck it, just go to a rich neighborhood and use a mailbox there. It'll arrive on time. None of this favors any one party over the other, but it will ensure that whoever wins the election, we can still claim to be a democracy after this November. U.S. Postal Service. We deliver for you in rain, snow, hail, and even bullshit. Authorized by the Department for Delivering Mail, and also arresting con men on luxury yachts.
Part of the problem that seems to be unfolding on the surface, which is sort of the traditional political sphere with the media and political parties, is one issue. But below that, there is another current that's unfolding, which is this dangerous turn that American conspiracies have taken. You've spoken a lot during your lifetime about the role of corporate media in spreading propaganda, but now there's another highly contagious form of propaganda, and that's the rise of internet-based conspiracies like the Plandemic and QAnon, which are turbocharged by social media. And in a way, the biggest challenge that we face right now is in the human mind en masse as it struggles to navigate and pass through this minefield of misinformation. Have you had a chance to think about that and how that integrates into this whole picture?
A lot of chance to think about it. It's very serious. In the United States, it's an epidemic, but it's worldwide. Let me just give you one example. That one of the things that can be done on the internet, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of it in the future, is just faking articles and attributing them to somebody. There's nothing you can do about it. I've had it happen to me a number of times. The crazy articles put up on the internet, my name under them. You can say it's not me, but it doesn't matter. Once it's on the internet, it's all over the place. Well, one of them was about the pandemic. An article, something was posted on the pandemic saying the pandemic was created in a U.S. military lab on purpose to try to control the whole world. Signed, Noam Chomsky. Got lots of letters from all over the place. Interesting. Okay. Many of them from friends, sensible people, Europeans, sensible left intellectuals saying, thanks for finally telling the truth.
Get out your notebook.